Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We are awaiting the arrival of our final panelists, but we decided we would get started now. This is our panel on what's double exposure called The Big Social, which I thought was a good name. With us are Jeff and Larissa, who are the director and producer, respectively, of the documentary Social Dilemma, about the addictive and destructive nature of social media. And we have Marek Tushinsky, who is the creative director and co-founder of Tactical Tech, an NGO that does provocative work on technology, human rights, and civil liberties. Work you might have seen of his was The Glass Room, which showcased surveillance and other creepy technology in an Apple store-like setting. And I'm Julia Engwin. I'm moderating this panel. I'm the editor-in-chief of The Markup. We're a nonprofit newsroom that investigates the impact of technology on society. I have been writing about the impact of technology on society for 10 years. At the Wall Street Journal and ProPublica prior to this, and much of my work is focused on algorithmic bias, particularly in reference to this panel, work about sort of discriminatory advertising on the Facebook platform. So we're here to talk about Big Social and what it all means, and I thought we should just start with a question about what is the actual problem that we're facing? I'm sure most of you may have seen The Social Dilemma, but that is sort of a question that's posed to many of the people who speak in it. And all of them are a little bit stumped and don't actually have a full answer for it. And so it seems like it's worth sort of just diving into that straight away, what you all think of it. Jeff, do you want to start?
Sure, I'll be happy to kick it off. And thank you so much, Julie, for hosting this, and thank you, Marek, for being here. I think the reason why it was difficult we really leaned into that in the opening of the film, because it has become complicated in that there are so many different problems within tech right now. There's not a singular silver bullet. Part of it also in my mind is that the tech industry has morphed from being a handful of companies making silicon chips in the Bay Area to now every industry in the world uses technology and many use algorithms, and that those algorithms can have biases built into them, and it's not coming from a singular place or a singular source. In the film, we really tried to focus on the advertising business model, though, as being like the core central, this is the most asymmetric thing that is misaligned with human society. So for me, the biggest focus in my mind is the ad business model.
Larissa?
Yeah, I don't have too much to add to that. I think the only other thing I might say is that it feels like a type of problem that is very similar to climate change, which is very much in the wheelhouse of the work we've done previously, in that climate change is a big problem, but there are all sorts of facets of environmental disasters that are wreaking havoc on our world, from coral bleaching to ocean acidification, to agricultural runoff. There's just innumerable events that are really plaguing our world. And I think very similarly with this technology issue, there are so many facets, so many different parts of this issue that it's sometimes hard to grasp, what is the root cause? What is the thing that is really below all of the other things? And I think, as Jeff pointed out, it really became this business model for us that is just fundamentally misaligned with the user.
Mark?
I'm thinking of, hi everyone, and thanks for having me on this panel. I'm trying to come up with something maybe more unusual and more provocative than usually I would say. I was actually super surprised that none of the protagonists of the film were able to articulate what would be the problem from their point of view. It seems they should have a very good idea what the problems are. I think for me, the real issue here is that technology is right now, especially manifested through social media, but other forms of how we construct, create, and share information is everywhere. It's persistent, and it's inseparable from how we do now everything, politics, how we live our social lives, etc. And it also includes people who may not have access to this technology directly, because it is present there through other means and enables those who are gatekeepers in power of this technology to quantify life, for that matter, or politics and so forth, and influence people outside of the technology as well. So I think this moment that have happened in maybe last 2 decades, where we entirely become immersed in technology, is the shifting point, I think. And then we can debate about who is bad, who is good, whose intentions are better than others. But I think in a way, we as humanity develop a new complicated language that we're struggling to learn news right now. And I think, you know, film touches on some of the aspects of that. And I think people who are in the film struggle with the answer, maybe because they don't realize what they are part of. There's a certain arrogance in it that, you know, they think that the tools they develop are the tools. Those are just random names of random tools. If not them, will be somebody else, to be frank. So this is when I kind of come in with a little bit of a provocation.
Well, I'm going to sort of double down on that provocation and say, you know, I mean, one reason I think that those people couldn't answer that question is they were practitioners, right? They're mostly people who worked in the industry and then defected, right? And I think there are lots of people who have spent the past 10 years studying these issues and are more sort of scholars of it. And I think, just to be more provocative, many of those are women and women of color. And so, you know, I totally understand the choice to center the people who are defectors, because I have definitely seen that in my reporting, that, you know, the whistleblower coming forward has a lot more credibility with the audience. But it is something I'd love to hear you guys talk about.
Yeah, I think that was, as you were just describing that was the thing that gave me the first insights into it, was that hearing from friends who I went to college with who worked at these companies. You know, I was an outsider to the tech industry in many ways. And then when I heard people from Google and Twitter and Facebook kind of revealing their perspectives on those companies, that was the thing that was, hello, Brittany. Awesome. Good to see you. But to go back to your question there, Julia, that was the entrance point for me, was to hear from the people who had built these platforms and that built these products, revealing their thoughts on the harms of those products. Also, we did conduct those interviews. Most of them were conducted in 2018, and I think all of them do have their own answers for that question. We leaned into that a little bit more in the film, because I think that's where a lot of the general public is as well, right? So for a general public coming in to watch the movie, they're sort of like, what is the problem? Wait a second, I use this stuff every day. Why is there a problem with Instagram? Why is there a problem with Twitter? And we intentionally sort of ramped into that slowly to help the audience come on board and not just like hit them over the head with, oh, and here are the problems, like in the opening scene. So there was a bit of a creative and aesthetic decision-making on that as a tool for the audience to come into the story a little bit smoother.
Welcome, Brittany. Thanks for joining us. Most of you probably already know who Brittany is, but Brittany is a former executive at Cambridge Analytica. She was, I think, the star of The Great Hack, a documentary about how Cambridge Analytica had illegally obtained Facebook data to help Trump and Brexit. Brittany, we opened the panel with a question about, you know, this panel has been described as big social, and we talked about what is the problem of big social, like what is, because it's actually really hard to diagnose, and I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Absolutely. So I usually come at this problem from the legal and regulatory point of view, because that's my background and that's what I spend a lot of time working on. So in one sentence, the main problem of big social is that we have an inability to enforce the laws that we already have on digital platforms like Facebook. So for instance, we have laws against incitement of violence. We have laws against targeting people for increasing racial hatred. We have laws against voter suppression. We have laws against slander and libel. Yet somehow when all of these crimes are committed on big social platforms, we have zero to no ability to actually enforce that. So that is becoming increasingly a bigger problem, when the main question that we're asking executives of big social companies is, will you flag something as inappropriate content? Will you take it down? But if someone were to do something like that in person, they would be arrested in many states, right? And in many countries. So I think that is a huge issue, because things that we would normally consider crimes or consider massive problems in our society, that even if we don't have specific laws around it, which most of these things we have very specific laws around, we definitely have social contracts to say that these things are completely inappropriate and it would not be tolerated if you did in person. But because you are doing it in a digital space, we have we just don't have much legal recourse. And I think that's where the problem gets compounded, where people can behave however they'd like to online in ways that they would never be able to physically in society. So being able to make our laws enforceable in our digital lives, I think, is the #1 problem that we have to deal with.
I don't want to get this too wonky, but as long as we're talking about that, is there one thing that would make those laws enforceable? Because I think there's a lot of arguments about that in policy circles, and I think the thing that immediately leaps to my mind is Section 230, which is basically a portion of the telecom bill of 1996 that sort of exempts the platforms from liability. And I'm curious, do you have an actual prescription, Brittany, that you propose on this front?
Well, I don't think it's just the exemption for the platforms. I think it's also holding the people responsible that are logging in and that are uploading data and targeting a specific group of people for a specific purpose. So the only way to trace, I suppose, the liability, so whether we're going to hold the platform liable for publishing content that is breaking a law, or whether we are going to hold the person liable that decided to log in and do that, if we're going to ever be able to exempt the platform, which is obviously not my highest interest, but if we're going to actually find the perpetrator, for instance, of someone that is inciting violence online, these big social platforms need to be transparent with us on what data is being used to target whom with what content for what purpose. Yael Eisenstadt, who was the former head of global elections integrity at Facebook, she often says, and we completely agree with each other on this point, that one of the main problems with being able to enforce regulations on Facebook is that we don't have full transparency, and therefore you cannot see the intention behind the ad. So the ad by itself might look innocuous, but if you look at who it was targeted to and for what purpose and by whom, then you can actually tell that likely a crime was committed, or at least a seriously negative intention that wouldn't normally be tolerated in society was perpetrated on the platform. So I really think that being able to trace that direct criminal liability, and whether it's the platform for allowing the publishing of something like that, or whether it's the individual who decided to use that tool, still the lack of transparency is our #1 issue for lack of enforcement.
It's interesting because that's a sort of, I think what you were saying, Jeff, was just like the problem is like deeply embedded in the ad targeting.
Right.
There's, I think, an effort in Europe right now to maybe ban micro-targeting. Is that correct?
That I
Yes.
haven't heard. I don't know, but do you know more on that, Marek?
Mark?
Yes, like a new regulations being disputed at the EU level right now that would make that this difficult. I don't think banning is possible, but let's see. Yes.
Just to plus one what Brittany was saying there, I think it fits in this broad category of algorithmic transparency. Like there are all of these algorithms operating in our society right now that nobody has insight into, and they fall under the auspices of private intellectual property, trade secrets, and yet if they're discriminatory, if they're causing harm, if they're perpetuating harm, nobody has any oversight into looking into it. I mean, there seems to be a growing need for something along the lines of a Department of Algorithmic Transparency, or some sort of regulatory body that has the authority to go in and confirm, oh, this algorithm is not causing genocide, great, or this algorithm is not destroying democracy, great. And I mean, this applies at so many different levels. Yet, I think the people who are writing the code, as well intended as they may be, they don't recognize the consequences of the quote tools that they are making. And I think this is where we've now seen that these that machine learning algorithms are so incredibly powerful. They are so asymmetrically powerful. They are not in comparison to any other form of advertising we've had before. The ability for them to learn on their own and to both filter people and to reinforce and to push people down rabbit holes like that, that entire structure is putting so many unknown consequences on our society. So we can talk about it within the big social companies, but then there are places where we're seeing these algorithms just broadly harming people all around the world in different areas. So this is, we can rattle off the different ways we could try to aim for solutions. Section 230 is a great place to start with, I think, the big social platforms. I'm hearing some conversation around tort reform, and this goes beyond my legal expertise, and I don't know if Brittany or Merrick, if you can add to that, but the idea of pursuing lawsuits at different state levels around specific harms that have happened, could this be a way to reverse engineer solves that build up to a bigger pressure?
I'd love to take that one. So I was the only expert witness in the first successful case against Equifax. And the lawyer that I worked with invented something called mass tort. So what we did is we found 500 people around the Minneapolis area who had been a victim to the data breach for Equifax. And we had every single one of them sue in municipal court for, at minimum, I think it has to be under $15,000 to go to municipal court. And that basically was the cost of lifetime fraud prevention insurance, right? So it's a certain amount every year for an average number of years. And so with 500 people that were suing Equifax, I mean, we were suing them for gross negligence, but for property damage. So we sued them as if our data was our property, and that they had damaged our property, and therefore we had to buy insurance to protect against the repercussions of that for the remainder of our lives. And
wow.
And so we got kicked up to a jury, and while we were in the middle of that case, the CEO of Equifax in Congress said that he felt like he would suffer damage if his own data were to be breached, and the local lawyer in our case said that Equifax as a company had zero responsibility for the protection of people's personal data. Can you believe that? That's their entire business model, is to hold and sell our personal data, right? Yeah. So because the local lawyer contravened what the CEO said, we got kicked up to the Supreme Court, and we won at the Supreme Court. So in the state of Minnesota, you own your data as your property because of that mass tort case, and we're now rolling it out for Marriott and a lot of the other really irresponsible companies that exhibited extreme negligence in the protection of our data.
Wow, that's awesome to hear. I was unaware of that. Is this something that you think could scale?
Yeah, absolutely. If you have enough interns, I suppose, to fill out all the paperwork. Most of it has to be done by hand on pieces of paper for municipal courts, and you have to sign people up and make sure that they are eligible to be a plaintiff in the case. But yes, it could easily scale, and our case was the first one to win, so it is the domino that pushed the kind of national settlement. And it's really possible to hold companies to account in that way on a national scale by starting local.
Cool. I didn't even know there were solutions out there. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's specifically because, when you go to bigger cases, you always reach the limitation of liability because the company is always able to spend enough money to push it out. But at the municipal level, decisions get made very quickly.
I mean, that is one great thing about our legal system in the US.
There's always a way.
Yeah, exactly. So Brittany, we were talking right before you joined also about sort of the question of how you narrativize these issues. They're so abstract, right? And I'm already worried. I'm like, oh my God, did we lose people because we're talking so wonky here? And it is so wonky and so abstract. And this is something I struggle with all the time in my reporting on it is, and I think I would just, I feel like what I was saying right before you arrived is that people love the whistleblower story. It resonates. It's individual, and it really brings the issue home, I think, in a way that that other narratives don't, and a social dilemma in some ways is also kind of, has a whistleblower element to it, right? Which is people are kind of saying, I really, I made a mistake and I participated in something bad, and let me tell you about the bad thing. And I thought, Brittany, it would be great to hear from you about your journey, because I think you definitely ended up on that journey, and how you ended up deciding to participate in the Great Hack, because I think it's probably a difficult decision, I'm guessing.
Yeah, well, so I'll be as quick as I can, and that's to say, throughout my time at Cambridge Analytica, I was really looking forward to learning how to use advanced tools to become a better campaigner. I'd spent my entire life training as a human rights lawyer and working in political and human rights activism, mostly pro bono work my whole life. And as an activist, you have trouble seeing the results of your work. It's very difficult to tell that even if you worked yourself to the bone and didn't sleep for years at a time, actually having tangible results for certain campaigns, especially around issues where you're fighting against a government, or it's really difficult to get people to care about a niche issue. It's just hard to measure your success. And so I've been writing my PhD on preventive diplomacy, which is how can you prevent war or atrocity crime by preventing it instead. So I thought it was going to be a PhD about how heads of state negotiate with each other, but it ended up all being about big data and predictive algorithms, which is what data sets do we have access to as militaries, as governments, as international organizations, who is modeling and analyzing that data, and how quickly is that information and how accurate is that information that is eventually getting to decision makers. So most people don't know that, but that was the framework under which I joined Cambridge Analytica so I could finish my doctoral thesis. And I learned a lot more about predictive algorithms than I expected over those years. And throughout, you could call it naive, you could call it eternally optimistic, which is the way that I see myself. But I was so excited to try this all over the world with different people who were president and prime minister, people that wanted to be, and different companies, even sometimes militaries and defense stuff, and learning about how all of this was used and applied for everything from policy creation to just, selling brand products was a very fast and steep learning curve for me. And so every time I had a red flag, which was usually on the legal side, because I have 4 law degrees, spent nearly a decade in law school, and trying to figure out what could and couldn't be done in every single country was always a massive quandary. Either there wouldn't be enough laws to tell us what we could or couldn't do in a specific place, or my executives would tell me that the data scientists could make the decision because they knew what they were talking about, and that I couldn't spend money on more lawyers. I shouldn't be calling the lawyers and creating invoices. I shouldn't be trying to hire a local data protection officer. And those red flags came up time and time and again until eventually I left the company and started to go through my documents and realized actually how bad some of the stuff was. When I made the decision to fly to San Francisco and spend a couple days with The Guardian, with Paul Lewis and Paul Hilder, going through what I saw as some of the most important documents, I originally started it with thinking, hey, I've got enough information to write a strongly worded op-ed. That's where I was starting. I think I'm going to write a strongly worded op-ed, and hopefully a lot of people will read it. And, they said, I think we have something a little bit bigger in mind. And so after 2 days straight, literally, I think like 48 hours of video interviews and going through my documents and audio interviews, we released a package of 4 stories and a video At that point, the entire world was blowing up. Facebook had lost $120 billion, and the entire world was looking at us for answers. And I got a call from Kareem Amer, one of the directors of The Great Hack. He was introduced to me through Paul Hilder, who co-wrote all of my whistleblowing interviews. And he said, hey, we've been trying to make a movie about data since the 2014 Sony hack.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And we have interviewed so many different people that we thought we could tell a story to, and we haven't been able to find someone that can actually tell a story that can, you know, explain to the world what this is and what a massive issue it is in the world, I suppose. Can we come and interview you? I said, well, I have no idea how bad this is going to get. I'm getting on a plane to Thailand. If you want to meet me there, you're welcome to do so. But I don't know when I'm going to be coming back to the US, depending on how people react to the fact that I just said the president was elected illegally. So see you in Thailand, or give me a call. We'll meet another time. And Kareem and an entire film crew showed up in Thailand within 2 days of that conversation. And again, I thought this was going to be one interview that may or may not end up in some documentary someday. And I ended up being with Kareem and the crew for 9 months.
Just if I can add to that, which it's great to hear you share that whole recounting, Brittany, because Kareem and Jahan, we'd been talking with them as well while we were making The Social Dilemma, and they were still in the process of figuring out where the film was going to go. And I think these are the struggles of a documentary filmmaker. You can only use whatever you capture, right? So you're trying to film and follow the different leads and stories, and all the kudos to Kareem and Jahan for what they pulled off there. Because as you said, like, they started on the Sony hacks and were trying to explore, you know, these breaches of data from a completely different lens. And I think they were really struggling, as you said there. And so just as a filmmaker, you're following these different stories, and you put so much time and effort into filming stuff that might never see the light of day. And you're like, okay, well, we just spent a year or 2 years filming, and all that's now moot. But now they picked up on your story, and that was able to form the backbone of The Great Hack. So it's a challenge, just empathizing with Kareem and Jahan and the struggle and making a movie.
I mean, Jeff, I'm sure you have similar stories. I'd love to hear the sort of origin story for you guys and how this came about.
Well, I saw Tristan Harris post on Facebook his 60 Minutes piece with Anderson Cooper, and I had met Tristan in college in passing, and we had one really good mutual friend, Jeff Seibert, who's also in The Social Dilemma, and I reached out to Jeff, and I was like, what's going on here? Like, I didn't realize this critique of social media or the tech giants or this advertising business model. And this was 2017, and so that was kind of my moment. I think prior to that, Eli Pariser's TED Talk on filter bubbles had always been in the back of my mind. And I remember telling Larissa about this, like in 2011 or 2012 when it came out. Like, I want to do something about this. This is a huge issue, but couldn't figure out a way to make a movie about it. And so after seeing Tristan's piece on 60 Minutes, reached out to him, started talking, and tried to explore what was going on. We had been working on climate change films with our past films, Chasing Ice and Chasing Coral, and Tristan was referencing this as a climate change of culture. And I was like, all right, you knew how to get to my heart, and let's keep talking about this. And that's really how we started to see it, this invisible change that's happening to our society based on how a handful of people have written some code that is invisibly reshaping our entire societal infrastructure. And how do you do justice to that? And how do you capture that story? And how do you explore that? I think at the very beginning, Larissa and I, it's funny, we did something with one of our cinematographers recently, and he was reminding me that at the beginning of the process, I thought this was going to be a very heady talking head movie. And that's why we shot with many cameras. We shot Tristan's interview with 7 or 8 cameras, just knowing that we wanted angles and options and the ability to keep it like visually lively. And then we constantly thinking about how can we make it more and more accessible. And we came up with this frame around an inside out for your phone. And we're able to try to bring that to life and to anthropomorphize and visualize the models that they make of us, the data that they collect and what that goes into. And to try to just give, it's like Larissa's background right now, right? It's like give people a sense of this matrix universe that we are all unknowingly living in. And so the hope was to make that a little bit more accessible to the public so that, you know, when they pick up their phone, they're like, well, wait a second, why are these notifications coming in? What is exactly going on? So that was one of the just artistic and creative challenges that ended up becoming a really, really fun challenge, but it's something that I think we were able to try to blend. We wanted the film very deeply rooted in truth and nonfiction. It is a nonfiction movie, yet there is this narrative that can hopefully bring it to life for people.
Mm-hmm. So the reenactment, or no, so I don't even know if it's a reenactment. What do you call?
Yeah, we call them the narrative scripted elements. That's what
the
we call them.
Scripted elements, right? Yeah. So, I mean, I'm not a documentary filmmaker. I don't know anything about it, but certainly in my field in journalism, like that would be not allowed.
Right.
It does. I'm curious. Is it a controversial choice? And was it difficult to decide to do that?
Oddly, with nonfiction filmmaking, there's no like authority that's overseeing, right?
Right.
It's this based on everybody's own integrity around what you're
Mm-hmm.
putting out there. We felt very comfortable with that, in that all of the stuff that we were bringing to life was based on what we learned from the experts and the engineers about how the algorithms work. We were really trying to be accurate to, like, these are the intentions of the algorithms. These are what they're optimizing for. These are the consequences they're having on people. In many ways, there was a piece that came out, I forget when it came out. The New York Times did a story on the making of a YouTube radical that became the backbone for their podcast, Rabbit Hole. Mm-hmm. And we had read that, and that became a huge inspiration for Skylar Gasando's character in the film, about being radicalized through this kind of interplay and relationship with a machine learning algorithm. So we were really trying to ground all of it in a real world truth. Go ahead, Larissa.
The Big Short was, I think, a really big inspiration for us, which is the narrative film that, you know, they are able to get the audience to understand what a subprime mortgage is and why that bubble popped through these very entertaining kind of little segments. And I think for us, it was trying to figure out what's the reverse of that, what's a documentary version of that then can have these narrative segments that can open our eyes to what are the downstream consequences that can really impact an individual, so that you can then see as an audience member, gosh, this is how this plays out. This is how this technology can actually make somebody feel. And I think, you know, the Sophia Hammonds, who plays Isla, the young girl, just like, it breaks my heart every time I see that, because she's a real person and she really does feel the same things. She really is, you know, susceptible to social media and the way that it is harming, you know, the youth generation. And I think it is just a way to hopefully be able to exemplify, you know, what each of these things could possibly be doing.
I want to bring Mark in because he's also struggled with this challenge. You know, he has been working on, you know, how to explain to people what technology is doing for years. And it's so hard. And I thought, Mark, it would be interesting to hear from you, like how you've tackled it.
Thanks. I mean, I obviously would prefer listening to others because those stories are fascinating. But here I come with another story of how do you build a narrative? And it's different than a film. And what we do, that is non-linear. So it doesn't start at minute 1 and ends at minute 90 or whatever. And how you engage the public into exploring certain things that they normally find complicated, complex, boring, too technical, patronizing. You can just name it. Whenever you start a conversation about encryption, like, people leave the room. So it's not easy to talk about technology. You can't really compete with other narratives that are present in people's lives. So, I mean, the link here, I have to make a kind of a disclosure. If you go to the Social Dilemma website and you look for solutions, you would end up looking at Data Detox Kit, which is one of the ways we address kind of the question that people come up with. So now what? What can I personally do? Not solve the problem that I've seen, but to gain better understanding of how I'm using technology, what it is, what does it to me, and so forth. So in this, excuse me, non-linear storytelling, so what we ended up doing is in a way of a classical culture jamming. So you take the language of the corporate, and that is, for us, was this iconic Apple Store. It started before Apple Store started doing Apple Stores, with this idea that the space where you can experience new technology is clean, is welcoming, is spacious, and is presented to you in a way that you kind of not sure if this is an art exhibition or is a shop. And it also has people who are called geniuses that are lovely, and they can sort out your basic problems with the devices that you have in some other way. So we took that idea and we recreated in a way the space, except we turn around the content in this space to exactly create this non-linear experience. So you can come in whenever you want, you can touch anything you want, and you can spend 5 minutes there, or you can spend 2 hours. And Tristan Harris spent 2 hours in the glass room in San Francisco, I have to say, where he visited. And we are also showing the great hack. But the principle there is, we could not find practically public spaces, public outside of academia, outside of art spaces, etc., that would create digestible forms of learning about what bothers you about technology. So we decided, okay, the Apple Store is one thing, but inserting yourself in a shopping street in a big city where people pass by and they look for things, they look for excitement, they look for spending time meeting friends and so on, is the place you want to be, and test the kind of a hypothesis that we often are being told that, the audience is not interested in these topics. The people don't care, that they don't understand how it works, etc., and so forth, to kind of see if that's true. And it is not true, to say it shortly. In San Francisco, we had about 20,000 people in 3 weeks, the same in New York and London and in Berlin. And they spend a lot of time in this space, and they ask a lot of extremely valid questions that are also very personal. I can tell you more about the content if you want, how we build these narratives. Maybe that's kind of helpful in the context of how you kind of write a script for a film, and how is it different from how you build a space to experience something. So we try to address like a triangle of issues. So the one that is the most important is our individual relationship with technology. Because even in the film, people say that it's instantly empowering, and you can find your own reason. For some people it will be Uber, for some other maps, for some other things, whatever, doesn't matter. But it is instantly empowering, and we like that. And it's frictionless, doesn't require any difficult learning curve. And if you can afford, the device, and you can afford the connection, etc., not everybody can, then you are easily in that world. And that world would not exist if you were not in. So it's not only, Facebook or other big companies. They exist not only because they have smart people designing complicated algorithms, but because people want to do something that is a mediation between them and the world, using this technology that for them is purely empowering. The other narratives we try to look at is the companies, which is the main topic of the social dilemma. In this case, social networks, but we look at much more broadly. Big Five is usually the group that we look at. How you can find a kind of entry point to the consumer and user to understand their role as gatekeepers. Those that are in the exclusive position of accumulate enormous amount of data with certain ideology behind it and politics, and then monetize that. And so they become extremely wealthy. And then also that creates enormous knowledge base, or so they think. There's no direct transfer from data to knowledge or wisdom, but this is the belief of big companies that they can create that kind of a new world based on quantification and addressability of everything. And the last narrative we're looking at is the social consequences, what the normalization of surveillance in that case does to society. And we work with artists, we create our own objects, we work with ready-mades, films produced by companies, and we have engineers in space giving advice and tours, and we have the data detox, that is the kind of a simplified kind of model on self-help material that gives you some basic steps what you can do next.
That's great. Thank you, Mark. I don't know if any of you had spent time in the classroom, but it was fun to visit. I just
like really wish I could see it.
I know. It was really cool. There must be videos, right, Mark?
Oh yeah, no, we have like videos, 360,
Yeah.
somebody.
But it's still not the same. I was thinking that like it's interesting, if you don't mind me injecting a little of my own experience here, because I have also struggled with these same issues. What we do at the markup and what I have done sort of my own career is actually the way I've kind of narrativized these issues is actually by collecting data about the data collection, right? So essentially I have just built a career around adversarial data collection, which in some ways, while you were talking, Mark, I was thinking it is kind of performance art. It's a journalism finding and we prove things, but it's also a way to get attention, right? Because it is kind of clever and cool, and we release our data sets, and we build tools that you can play around with data, and so I was thinking that like in some ways that's sort of been our gimmick, is to fight fire with fire.
Right, it's awesome. And if the data can just refute the claim from a company, it's like you could just show that, and it's a really powerful way for people to kind of realign their assumptions.
Yeah, I mean, one of my favorite things is, what we did recently with, I'm sure you guys are familiar with the book that Sophia Noble wrote, Algorithms of Oppression, right? Where she wrote about how, it's such a great cover.
It's great.
She wrote about how, as a Black woman, when she was Googling Black girls, all the results were porn. And that wasn't true for white girls. And her book came out in 2018, I think.
18, I think. Yeah.
But she had written about it in a magazine article earlier, I think almost as far back as 2012. And so Google had started to clean up those results. So they were kind of patting themselves on the back that it was clean. But what we did was we noticed that if you went into the Google ad buying portal and said you want to buy ads against turned Black girls, it was still all porn. And not true for white girls or white boys. But it was also porn for Latin girls, Latina girls, and all the other ethnicities. And so it was one of these things where you saw that they had just put one Band-Aid over a thing that they had been publicly shamed for, but there was no change to the underlying algorithm, right? And so that, and then of course after we did that, they cleaned that up, but I'm sure it exists somewhere else in the system, right, that hasn't Band-Aided.
Exactly. I feel like that's inherently the problem, is that we have these platforms that are designed around user-generated content that say, give us everything and anything, right? As opposed to journalism. Journalism is like, we have editors, we're going to do thorough research, we're going to have fact-checking, we're going to confirm if this is a worthy story or not, and then we're going to publish it. It goes through all of these filters before any sets of words are deemed valuable to share with the public. On the other side of the equation, you have like, give us everything and anything, and we will put some Band-Aids on the most egregious stuff. I mean, this applies to Google, this applies to Facebook, it applies to Twitter, it applies to Instagram, right? It's like, give us everything because that's our business model. And we will maintain the PR image that we are doing the right things to flag the most egregious things in the system. But inherently, it's never going to keep up with the flow of both bad content, bad actors, inaccurate content. And then one of the downsides too is that if you check your Twitter feed, that very thoroughly researched piece from a journalist has the same amount of space and characters as this complete BS that came in from somewhere else. And now they're being put on the same equivalency and the same value as you're just scrolling by. And so we're being trained around devaluing meaningful research and to accept everything and anything else that hasn't been vetted. And the whole system is one that breaks down our information ecosystem, right? The entire system breaks down truth, breaks down shared understanding. And I think this is one of the real things that is leading to the increasing sense of polarization, that we can't come together if we are morphing how we understand and interpret the world, how we make sense of the world.
Yeah.
And Sophia, even in her book, I mean, I think she also then used YouTube and Googled the same thing. And it was like playing whack-a-mole. Like they had fixed Googling, but they hadn't fixed the YouTube version of it. And for me, my experience was very much like climate change is, and you'll go on Google and it will say, these are suggestions. They're not recommendations. They're not predictions. But, Kathy O'Neill, who's in The Social Dilemma, would say that algorithms don't predict the future. They cause the future because we are doing what it serves to us. us. We don't know that the menu that it's serving is different for each of us, and we don't know what went into that and the dollars behind how those search results were ranked.
I mean, it's also worth mentioning that, you know, this sort of flattening of true content and other content has also led to the financial destruction of journalism, right? I mean, because
Absolutely.
why would you advertise against expensive, pricey content when you could just advertise against things that are clickable?
Absolutely.
Can I add something, Julia, if you're allowed?
Yeah.
About the other aspect, I think, because we all I think the audience also is interested in the storytelling and how you kind of sustain it and spread it as wide as possible, because not everybody can watch Netflix. And I think not everybody can go to Glassroom in San Francisco. What are the other ways, you know, how we could collaborate across different sectors to enable the potential audience and visitors to be able to experience different way of seeing technology and so forth? Like with the Glassroom, we immediately turn it into a portable version that we collaborate with libraries, schools, and community centers to create mini exhibitions. It has nothing to do really with the big one. It only conveys a little bit of the narrative, but it does important thing for us, which is empower people who would like to bring these topics to certain communities, to have material to work with that is not boring, that is exciting, and that touches, you know, the way people use technology. So it's not speculative. It's actually as it is, if you like. And I think that's quite important, because films, you know, they go up and then the viewership goes down, but the demand still for being able to understand what the film is talking about is there. And maybe some people in the audience here may have some other ideas or interest in looking at how you reach these audiences and how you sustain this kind of conversation. And for me also, the last thing is, if you look at, you know, even the elections of presidential elections in the US or Brexit in the UK and other, you know, examples of impact of technology on society, the biggest problem we see that is dividing families a lot, and you can see that a lot in the US. And the polarization is a kind of abstract thing of the groups, but it's happening within the kind of a, you know, essential element of society, to put it this way. And so we try to also build tools and narratives for people to be able to, you know, don't just continue hating each other for their views and go to their bubbles, but rather try to have, you know, trusted conversations that do not require technological mediation, and allowed actually different points of view and still be able to coexist in such a way that is fruitful for everybody involved.
Absolutely. I'm so glad that you mentioned being able to access or make this type of educational material accessible for communities that might not have access to Netflix, where they can watch The Social Dilemma and The Great Hack. I think that's so incredibly important. It's interesting that you mentioned kind of like you know, a mobile mini exhibit, because myself and the members of my Own Your Data Foundation, we just decided that we're going to invest in a mobile classroom, where we're actually going to turn a van into a digital literacy classroom, because we teach this new IEEE global standard called DQ, which stands for IQ or EQ. It's a digital intelligence quotient that's been developed over the past 10 years by a lot of the organizations that we know and love, like Common Sense, and a lot of the world's top technology universities and ministries and departments of technology and innovation. And it was just released this year as an IEEE global standard, and it's now being implemented into schools around the world. And that teaches kids, parents, teachers, and there's also a program for adults about what are your data rights, what are basic cybersecurity protocols, media literacy, so you can spot fake news and disinformation and hacking and phishing attempts. It teaches you emotional intelligence when interacting with other people online, how to rid yourself of device addiction, and you know, plenty more. There's a massive indicator set. So I really think making sure that we can integrate the learnings from The Great Hack and The Social Dilemma to people who either might not have their own devices or might not have Netflix specifically, to be able to bring those learnings into communities physically. Actually, as a follow-up to The Great Hack, we did an AR VR piece, which actually I suppose is not very accessible, except that we set it up in mobile locations. We did it at Sundance last year, and that specifically allows anyone to, put on a headset and see in see in a VR space what it actually looks like to be targeted. We actually launched it with Hillary Clinton so that she could actually see what happened to her further from what we showed in the Great Hack, and that was really accessible and impactful for people. And I'm kind of working on translating things like that are more appropriate and accessible for children, but also in disadvantaged communities where they might not have a lot of technology or access to platforms to watch full films. And so, like, at your permission, I would love to start using clips of the social.
Yeah, let's definitely offline about that, Brittany. That's all. I'm just picturing this van going around the country. That sounds amazing. Yeah,
No,
very, very cool.
So
yeah,
to be able to show clips of the social dilemma, I'm thinking of a little pop-out theater where we could do classes like in a park, especially when we don't know
cool.
when it's acceptable to go into schools again. So
right.
Be able to teach outside and make things accessible for people while we don't know how long this pandemic is going to go on.
Very cool.
Yeah, there's so much hunger out there for concrete advice, I feel like. We get that a lot at the Markup. I started it really as an investigative outlet, and that's still our primary thing, but we actually have like Ask the Markup series. We've realized that what people really want, like they sort of want us to do the investigations mostly because they just want to make sure that somebody's policing that stuff, but what they want to read is like which app is taking what for me and like what do I need to know. And so we actually started a whole sort of a series of just helping people understand all of that, because it's just far too complicated. It should be much easier to sort out.
Right.
But also it's super important. We also have, Brittany, for you, you can check, we have this portable version that we just launched over the Glassroom that is entirely focusing on misinformation and has some interactive stuff as well. But what you're talking about, Julia, I think one of the other things we're now building is the entire portfolio of work that is directed at young people, age 12, 16, because we reckon that this is the group that is kind of under the radar, and they usually at this age, in some places, not everywhere, don't get me wrong, for the first time on a device, and there's a very little control, parents or others that are taking care of them can have over that. And we build that together with young people to kind of, address their questions and so on. But I also heard some 12 years old talking about the social dilemma because they like the gamification of the film. So I think that's a great success in itself.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to say something sort of provocative, which is I think it's great to work in schools, but like, I feel like there's actually a lot of evidence that the people who are being most targeted and most vulnerable are actually the older people. My kids are so freaking savvy. Nobody can get anything by them on social media. And they're my kids, obviously, but still, my daughter watched The Social Dilemma, and at the end she was like, whatever, like, it's just the old people who don't know how to navigate that stuff. Like, and so I also think there is sort of an element of like focusing on seniors and literacy and media technology.
Yeah, that.
But we need you to get 1,000 vans, Brittany, and go all over the place with education. Yeah.
Well, I'd love to team up on it. There's a lot of work to be done, especially when this year the entire world is all of a sudden forced to be living nearly a completely digital life. We did not expect to have to ramp up, digital literacy around the world this quickly. I definitely didn't think that it was going to, be an exponential problem this year when it was something we were all already working on over the past few years, and the problem was big enough. Now it's definitely a lot worse. So there's an untold amount of work for us to do, for sure.
Right. But to your point there, Brittany, I mean, that's one of the things that I'm concerned about is that this is exponential technology, and we are not addressing it at exponential scale solutions. And so the fear in my mind is that the consequences are just going to continue to grow and ramp up and become like harder and harder to catch and rein in. So how do we scale up solutions and address these things with a meaningful response?
Well, again, that's why I've started with concentrating on children, and the entire kind of DQ program does focus on children because that's a long-term sustainable way of making sure that the next generation is not going to be falling into the same traps that we have. I've found when teaching adults that getting people to get rid of the bad habits they already have is much more difficult than when you're teaching a child that is just about to get their first device but has never used any of these tools yet, how they should use them and the way that they should view them. So I hate to say it, but I really do think this is going to be a generational issue, and that until the kids that we're teaching now are our age, that this is going to be nearly impossible to solve. And I am an eternal optimist, and that's still the way that I see it. So I spend a lot less time working with adults because I don't think that that's the way to solve the problem in the end, when we only have limited hands and capacity.
I would like to just say one word about the exponential, because it is, and it's not only exponential in terms of numbers of people on the social media that we talk about right now, and mostly we talk about the American social media, the platforms that designed in Silicon Valley, but the exponential two things. One is other tools in other places, China or Russia or other countries do not use these tools. They use other tools, and they have different kinds of frameworks and control over them and purposes of using them and so forth. But also the exponential kind of a still dominating belief that if only we could gather all the data, we would be able to solve all the problems, which is extremely problematic. That is perpetuating people, even those who are trying to change the situation. The solution is they've done it bad, we've been there, but now we can do it better. And the question is that true?
Do you think it's true?
If I think if it is true, well, I think in certain circumstances, these people who have enormous knowledge about how these tools work probably can fix them. But when you see how granular role they play in the mechanics of how they're being created, I don't actually think that they have an outlook on how complex the systems are, and they can actually create solutions, because this kind of belief that we need a machine to tell us who we are, and those are the black boxes, etc., is kind of interesting way of seeing the world. There's a true when Harry says that there's a lot of problems out there. Well, they're not out there; they're here, and we have to be able to act as large groups of people making significant decisions about how we want these things to be for the future generations. And it's not only about the climate change. And these tools may be extremely important to master them. But the question, from Audre Lorde, can you rebuild the master house using master tools?
Completely with you on everything you just shared there. I think on my end, this is why so much of this comes back to the business model for me, because who's making the tools for what purpose? Machine learning algorithms can be really positive for us. Like I wish like my DNA sample was used by my doctor to give me better medicine that's going to help me live a better life, not used by my insurance company to regulate and control my healthcare options. Right? I think that's can machine learning benefit society? I think it can, but I don't trust machine learning in an algorithmic tool if it's designed by a business model that's inherently, by its very core and definition, focusing on somebody else's intentions. So for me, I think that's just a very, very simple way to it's an oversimplification for sure, but can they help us? I think so, but we've lost the trust and faith in these companies to build things for the public. So I think that's a huge shift that needs to happen. And that's also embedded in the mindset of the people who have been making a lot of these platforms. So what does a new generation of technology look like that's designed for humanity by a very different looking group of people with different intentions and a different business model that's going to help and serve humanity? I mean, I keep dreaming and wishing, like, imagine if you use social media that made you feel better after you used it. Like, imagine if that was just the criteria, right? Like, where it's not based on these numbers and metrics that are driven by an advertising business model where eyeballs equals profits, but it's driven by qualitative feedback and subjective feedback where, did you feel better after this session? Do you feel closer to your friends and family? Do you feel more informed about society? Do you feel like you've gotten more critical thinking around the big issues you're curious about? Like, those are harder to measure. but those are the things that we need to measure. We're measuring the wrong things with these platforms that just count likes and clicks. So I don't know. I'm completely with you. There are no simple solutions here, and I am, like you're saying, Brittany, an optimist around this. But I don't think our solutions are going to come from the same mindsets that created the problems.
Right. And Julia, I mean, the work that you've done has just shown in the space that it doesn't seem like the same biases that were built into the systems in the first place how are they going to not be built into those same solutions?
I mean, that's the whole thing, is like you put in data from a racist patriarchal culture and you're like, I wonder why I'm getting these weird results. It's like, well, and then there's no adjustment, to it. I mean, just this week, right, Facebook said they're finally going to take Holocaust denialism off the platform, but no other genocide denialism. It's like, it's just like this endless series of Band-Aids.
Another Band-Aid.
Yeah. It's just kind of shocking. Like, and there's no coherency to it. Like they're essentially governments, they're, I'm curious, Jeff and Larissa, are you guys going to keep on this topic or go back to climate change?
Good questions. Literally, our team is having this conversation every day. I think there's just so much content to be made on countless different issues. I think it always comes down to what is the unique story that can be told, or where or how. But these are tech and climate. These are the two biggest issues in my mind. And how do we make meaningful progress on either or both of them? And part of it is we just need more and more and more stories and more art and more VR installations and more, like, the whole spectrum. I think we are in this era where we've seen countless climate films now, right? That climate change has been this drumbeat, and countless filmmakers and storytellers and artists trying to raise awareness about this issue that is this massive systemic problem. And I think we're at the birth of another generation of tech films and tech art and critiques that are likewise trying to hold power to account and raising awareness about the countless different aspects where technology is affecting our lives.
I think the reality too is that they're interconnected, and that's the thing with so many of the issues that we're facing. They're intersectional, just in the way that climate change is really actually climate justice. I think we're starting to see that it's going to be really difficult for us to solve the problem of climate change or climate justice without solving the technology issue and the information ecosystem issue and the filter bubble issue and the polarization issue and the lack of nuance issue. So, pick your issue of what you care about. I feel like it's going to be really difficult to solve it in its own silo. And that, as Jeff said, like the more stories that get told, the more awareness we have as a nation, as a world, the more better equipped we're able to empathize and understand other people's perspectives and to try to reach across the aisle to solve our problems.
We do have a question from the audience. I think this is basically a softball for Brittany. Do you think people in the US would be willing to pay in money rather than privacy for social media?
I mean, my opinion and what I've seen in practice so far is that we are already paying for our social media accounts, but we're paying in our data. Mark Zuckerberg likes to lie to us and say our data is only worth $17 a quarter, but that's still a pretty expensive subscription per year, if you think about it that way. And the reason why he says that number is because he wants us to not care about our data rights and think, I don't need $17 a quarter. Well, guess what, Mark? Over 2 billion people around the world live on less than $2 a day. And I'm sure they'd love their $17 and it could completely change their life. And so when we're talking about just the data that is collected in Facebook, that is a small fraction of all of the data that we have the possibility to create every day. And at a time where there is a huge chunk of the world that is completely unemployed and where we have completely destroyed a lot of our supply chains and employment opportunities during the pandemic, I really think that we need to start thinking about what the future of work looks like. And data ownership models are the best way to, for me to say that we have a tangible ability to make sure every person on earth is able to feed themselves every day. And that's the practical reality of it all. So, I often get into debates with people that say, oh, well, then some people are going to be, selling their privacy, et cetera, and so forth. But that's everyone's choice. You know, whether or not you want to share anonymous or pseudonymized data sets that could potentially go into solving cancer or preventing the next traffic accident. Whatever it happens to be, there are massive opportunities for us to share data that still allows our personally identifiable information to be kept safe. And that's the whole point of digital identity solutions. And when people mention, you know, is there good tech? I think there is good tech. A lot of it has to do with advanced forms of encryption, distributed ledger technology, and blockchain, where you have full control over what you would like to share or not. To wrap that up, we are already paying for social media. So whether or not the executives of those companies want to recognize that or not, they are getting significant monetary value from us. So I don't understand what other model we're looking for besides them to recognize that we're already paying them and, give us the choice of whether we want to opt out of that or not.
You know, the counter argument that I just feel obligated to raise is that obviously people, before there were rules, sold their labor, 24 hours a day, right? People would work until there were rules about how many hours you could work. And so if there was going to be data sales, you would want to think about what are the boundaries you would want to put on those kinds of things to restrict, really bad outcomes.
I would return the question to the person who asked it and forgive me very, outsider perspective on the topic, but in the US, people pay a lot for education, health, insurance, etc. And as you know, not everybody can, or many people cannot afford it, or have to live with the debts and so forth. I would ask this person, would you like people to pay for privacy the same way? Who would be able to afford it? What kind of privacy? Would there be any tiers and things like this, etc.? It's not a simple question to ask. It's not a binary question to ask, in my opinion.
Okay, well, we have 5 minutes left. So I was thinking maybe we should, everybody just do a wrap up of like the future. And is there anything positive that you can say about the future?
One of the things that I'm most excited about is that I do feel like the public is starting to wake up to this in a different way, right? That this drumbeat by many journalists and academics and scholars and artists have been talking about this for such a long time now, but I do feel like the public is starting to get to this turning point in recognizing, well, wait a second, maybe this isn't actually set up for our benefit. And, oh, wait a second, maybe these platforms are destroying democracy and teen mental health and misinformation and conspiracy theories. I think the consequences are just going to continue to ramp up such that it's forcing the general public to recognize this is not what we want. And whether that shifts and puts pressure on the tech companies from the public and from celebrities and from celebrities that are using these platforms saying, wait a second, I don't like these platforms, or if it comes from legislators and and policymakers who are recognizing, well, wait a second, we do have more we can do here, more we need to do. Or if it comes from tort reform lawsuits like Brittany's describing, I think we're hitting these tipping points and we're getting close to a reshift and a reshaping of what these technology platforms, how they interact with us in our lives. So I don't know, for me, I am optimistic because we are similar to climate change. Like we have no choice but to take action. Like we have to, because the status quo is just bad for civilization. And so it's just a matter of when and how we make those changes in our society.
I would echo that just like with climate change, we're seeing now very limited but specific changes that individuals are making on a daily basis that all add up. And I think the same thing is happening with tech. We're getting hundreds of messages from people saying, I've deleted these apps, or I've turned off notifications, or I'm fact checking, or you'll see emails go back and forth and say, did you fact check that? So there's just so many small steps that I think people are taking. But I would argue the same thing with the oil industry is the same thing with the tech industry. Right now, the onus is being put on the user. And that's not fair. That's not equitable. And that we're not going to stop. Everybody still has to do their individual actions, just like with climate change. But we have to get to a point where the industry is shifting, the system is shifting. Otherwise, it's not going to add up.
I just encourage every single person to start making a change within yourself every day. I can't tell you how mad I get at myself when I click terms and conditions and don't read them. You know, how many times a day do people who really care about this and preach this, you don't even go into the cookie settings before you accept them on a website where you need to read the article quickly. You know, if we still have these terrible habits, you know, what do we expect to teach to others? And so we need to make that change in ourselves. Like, do not use Google Chrome. You should be using Brave browser or DuckDuckGo. Like, stop, de-Googlify your life if you can. Like, start to think about using privacy-enabled products in your daily life. Start to think about reading those terms and conditions. And two last requests of everyone listening to this, which is please write and call to your legislators to say that you care about privacy and data protection legislation and regulation, and especially the regulation of big social and big tech. I know we don't have long to work with these same legislators either, so may I also make the point to look up people's opinions and records and vote with this as your #1 issue. Whether blue or red or independent, vote for people who actually care about making a change and making technology more ethical, because we should be able to use technology in order to improve all of our lives, but we need to make sure it's ethical technology and that everything we're doing is regulated. And specifically, if you are in California, vote yes to Prop 24 on your ballot, please.
I'm so sorry, guys. We've run into time. So Mark, I'm sorry. I'm gonna have to just, so thank you guys, everyone. This was a great panel. It was such a pleasure. And thank you to the audience for sticking with us through some of the wonkier parts. It was great. Thank you all.